Okay, it's 3 after, so let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is John Servos. I'm the Director of Commercialization Education at Fast Forward Medical Innovation, also known as FFMI, for those of you logging in from outside of the university. And I do want to welcome you to today's webinar. Before I introduce our speakers, I have a few things that I'd like to cover, including a couple technical items. Please keep your microphone and video muted today throughout the webinar to cut down on background noise and any distractions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can type it in the chat feature, or if you'd rather not type it in the chat feature, you can submit an X in the chat feature to indicate that you would like to ask a question. We should be a fairly small group today, so there's nothing wrong with also unmuting your microphone and asking the question directly. Note that the presentation is being recorded and that we will share a version of the recording and the slides with you post-program. Today's webinar is titled Intramural Funding for University-Based Translational Research. It is intended to provide a closer look at translational research and the funding that's required to reach a viable exit from the university. It's provided by Fast Forward Medical Innovation, as I mentioned, where we are a unit of the Medical School Office of Research. And we help biomedical researchers accelerate innovations from idea to impact. There are 4 functions of FFMI. We provide education, such as this webinar, and additional courses to teach commercialization concepts. We have multiple funding opportunities that come with mentorship, a business development team that connects investigators with company partners, and then we provide all of these services as a state and nationwide network as part of an innovation hub. Today is the 5th of 7 a la carte webinars that we are offering as part of this series. Broadly, the goal of the series is to outline and describe critical concepts related to commercialization, analyze unique paths to market, and appraise diverse models of academic and industry collaboration. You can see a full lineup of the remaining webinars here, as well as on our website with the recordings of the previous webinars. I'll note that the next webinar is Wednesday, August 19th, and will focus on the university exit and extramural funding. A final note from me is about the Innovation Studio. This is similar to office hours for innovators that are working on a project. However, we're going to enhance that experience by having you register with a description of your innovation and some preliminary questions. And that will allow us to reach into our network of contacts and invite the right people to be in the studio to provide you the best feedback and experience possible. More information and registration can be found on our website. The next studio is scheduled for August 18th, of which there are a few spots available, I know. So with that, let's introduce today's 2 speakers. First, we're going to hear from Michelle Larkin, who is the Director of Commercialization Programs at FFMI. Michelle has extensive experience facilitating commercialization grant funding projects and providing mentorship in the technology planning and development process with academic inventors, as well as outside companies. Prior to FFMI, she was the project manager with the U of M Coulter Translational Research Partnership Program and a biomedical engineer for the U of M Pediatric Device Consortium. She also has experience working for multiple Ann Arbor-based startup companies spun out of U of M Technologies. Michelle's going to speak for a bit and then transition to Sarah. Dr. Sarah Risch is a biomedical innovation specialist at FFMI, where she manages the Kickstart Awards as part of the Michigan Translational Research and Commercialization, also known as MTRAC, for Life Sciences Innovation Hub, which is a statewide program that accelerates the transfer of technologies from higher education to the private sector for commercialization. She received her PhD in biomedical science from Ohio State University. So thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for the rest of you on the call for joining us this afternoon. We're looking forward to it. And at this time, I will turn things over to you, Michelle.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. So the focus of today's webinar is translational research funding towards a viable academic exit from the university. And so today we're going to break it up into kind of 2 segments. This initial segment, I'm going to focus on what it takes or how you evaluate your technology and what a viable exit path looks like, and how you evaluate what your milestones and funding needs are from a university translational research perspective. We'll pause for some questions and then transition to Sarah, who will talk about many different translational funding resources and opportunities that are available to you, as well as some typical or example pathways utilizing these funding mechanisms to get your project from the university setting to a university exit. So let us begin by talking about funding your technology development path. So you're all probably here because you had an idea for a new product that could impact patient care, and you need some funding to move it forward. You've kind of surpassed the traditional NIH or NSF, R01s that would fund your basic research, and are seeking out opportunities to move from a research and discovery trajectory to a product development trajectory. Your initial instinct may be to form a startup company and seek out external investments. But there are many considerations into whether it's the right time to form a startup company, if forming a startup company is appropriate for your technology or your goals as an investigator. And there are many resources available to you as a university or health system investigator prior to making this leap. So first, as Sarah likes to say, we will begin with the end in mind, and we will think about what the right exit strategy is for your technology. And from an academic perspective, there are two main paths forward. Both involve licensing of your intellectual property, either to a startup company that is formed around your technology or your product, or licensing your intellectual property to an existing company, either another small startup or a larger, more established revenue-generating company. And how do we decide which path forward is the right one for your particular product? We'll talk about three main considerations when thinking about your exit strategy from the university or academic setting. And those are a competitive landscape assessment. So what exists in the current marketplace or solutions in development, and where do you fit into that? Are you a complementary technology or are you a disruptive one? We'll talk about your intellectual property status and potential freedom to operate considerations, which may limit certain exit strategies. And then we'll also talk about balancing what is right for your product, as well as what is right for you as an innovator and what your goals are in terms of bringing this technology forward. So first, let's talk about how to conduct a competitive landscape assessment. So first and foremost, the most important thing we want to consider is the status quo or the standard of care. So what is being done now? What are people currently using or trying to accomplish that solves a problem that you're also trying to address? And what would incentivize them to change from what they're currently doing? The largest barrier to adoption is getting people to do something different from what they already do. We also want to look at potential solutions that are in development. So who are your competitors as you try to develop your technology? Your competitors will be things that already exist and things that are soon to be existing. So who else is trying to solve this problem? If it's been attempted in the past, if they failed, why did they fail? And that may affect how you move your technology forward. And if they're successful, does that help you or does that hurt you in terms of moving forward in the marketplace? And then thirdly, we want to look at market dynamics. We want to look at who the potential customers or acquirers of the technology are, either existing companies or with the formation of a startup company, and how they're going to evaluate your technology. If we talk about intellectual property is the protection that the university or health system will pursue regarding your technology, and is the property that's being licensed out to either the startup company or an existing company. If we want to examine what type of IP is possible for your product, these are some main categories, and we'll talk about what is important from moving forward and how we can evaluate your intellectual property strategy and what that means for your exit strategy. So from a therapeutics or drug development perspective, there are two main types of intellectual property: composition of matter, which covers the chemical entity, the structure of the chemical entity that you have developed, And then also the method of use, which is the application for which you're using this composition of matter. In terms of therapeutics, composition of matter almost certainly trumps method of use, although method of use patents can be important. If you are, if you've discovered a different application, a different clinical application for an existing medication, or a different way to treat a disease using existing therapies. Composition of matter affords you the opportunity to move forward either from a startup formation or a licensing perspective. If you do not have composition of matter and only have a method of use patent, that will likely limit you to a licensing with an existing company exit strategy. And so that's important to consider as you develop your technology moving forward. From a medical device and diagnostic perspective, patents first and foremost are the most important, and generally they cover the device design, the function of the device or the diagnostic, and the applications for its use. What we want to consider from an intellectual property perspective, and I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit, from a medical device perspective, is if you have freedom to operate in the marketplace. And what that means is the ability to practice your invention without infringing on someone else's patents. And this goes back to what I said a couple of minutes ago about, are you a complementary technology or are you a disruptive technology? And what patent space affords you to be able to develop your technology in its entirety on your own as a startup company versus developing your technology to the point where it is complementary to an existing company's technologies that they may want to license it from you. And then if we move back towards the digital health intellectual property, there are many different types of IP that can cover digital health technologies. On the whole, the most common are copyright and trade secret. Copyright is protecting the source code that you have developed that runs your software. And trade secret is as protective as you are good a secret keeper. So if you don't tell anyone else what you're doing, then you can keep it as long as you want. Patents, to a certain extent, can cover different types of algorithmic software development, but on the whole, are not quite as impactful in the digital health space, given the time it takes to prosecute and get issued patents, as well as the ability to keep your technology secret because patents are in the public space. And then one note about open sourcing as well. From an academic perspective, it may be your goal that you've developed something that is, you think, of value to the greater research community, and you want to share that more widely. And that is a perfectly valid way to move your digital health technology forward. That will allow other people to use it while also bringing credit back to you as an inventor. So there is a conversation about balancing the commercialization of your product versus your goals as an innovator. We also want to look at who our potential customers are at the end of the day. So if we look forward past our university exit, who are our potential partners or acquirers that are going to take this technology on? They could include existing companies, they could include hospitals, insurance companies. And when we look at the market dynamics of these potential partners or acquirers, we want to look at which ones are likely to partner with us based on their current product offerings, based on their past partnering with other technologies. At what stage did they partner with these technologies? Was it at, they had a single site's worth of data, multi-site data? Were they, on the marketplace, actively selling their solution to customers and they wanted to buy out revenue? These are all things that we want to consider in terms of how far we have to take our technology from the idea stage through development to implementation in terms of who ultimately is going to acquire this technology from us. We can look at trends from similar technologies that have entered the marketplace in the last few years. And as I mentioned, also look at the company's past partnering history. There are a couple of great educational resources on campus that can help you evaluate your competitive landscape, your intellectual property strategy, and your potential market adoption strategy, as well as conduct customer discovery around all of these items to help you identify what your best path forward is for your technology. I'll mention them here. One is the FFMI Fast Case course, which is upcoming on September 25th. And then secondly, if you're working on a digital health-based solution, the University of Michigan Office of Tech Transfer offers a similar program called Digital Discovery that includes customer discovery as well as software-focused validation and wireframing that is offered at the University of Michigan as well as other institutions around the state. So I would encourage you to utilize these free resources on campus to help you evaluate what your potential exit strategy might look like. And then hopefully at the end of the day, after you've done this competitive landscape, market dynamics, intellectual property, customer discovery, and assessment process, you'll have identified at what stage you're likely to need to partner at in terms of what data would be required from you to accomplish a successful partnership. I've listed out a couple of different inflection points in the development process where partnerships tend to occur. At the in vitro proof of concept, that is extremely rare and I would say unlikely. But moving towards in vivo proof of concept of your technology, first in human study of your technology, approaching or obtaining a regulatory clearance or approval from the FDA, and then finally market entrance and adoption to the point where you're actually selling your technology to customers and generating some revenue that may be attractive to a potential partner. So once you've identified at what stage you need to be to partner, that will help you map out where you are currently, what milestones you need to complete to get to an active partnership, and how you can develop your funding plan to move towards that exit. So I'll stop there and take any questions that may be arising. And then I'll let Sarah take over for the remainder.
Any questions from the audience as we transition? Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly if you'd like.
All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, then I'll go ahead and get started with discussing the resources that we have here at U of M to move your technology forward toward that exit or that stage at which you can partner. So some resources that don't involve funding include the BME Senior Design course. And so that's going to be for folks with an idea for a medical device or a medical problem that a device solution would be helpful. So it pairs senior and master's BME students with clinical mentors who help them work through a needs assessment and developing prototypes. And we have the contact information here if that's something you might be interested in. And then again, as Michelle mentioned, the digital discovery process, which is operated through tech transfer. So you'd want to reach out to Drew Bennett if that's something that you're interested in. As far as funding resources that are available to help develop your technology, these resources are available to all verticals in the life science field. The first is the MISHAR Translational Seed Grants. So really the goal of these grants is to fund research to spur more research. So here we're going to be looking for promising and innovative clinical and translational research. So then this is available to projects at U of M. These next three that we have listed here are actually available statewide. They're all funded by the MEDC. These include the Advanced Proof of Concept Fund, which is operated out of Michigan State. This is for sort of earlier stage proof of concept studies in various technology sectors. The next is Kickstart, which is a little bit more advanced than the advanced program, but still in the early stage of development. And here we're looking for specifically life science projects that are probably past the stage of proof of concept. You have some data, but definitely need some more feasibility data to move forward to an M-Track project, which is our mid to late stage technology, hoping to be the last money in at the university stage to de-risk these projects so that they might be attractive to partners externally. There are also a few therapeutics specific funding resources that are available to U of M projects. This includes the Michigan Drug Discovery, or MDD, pilot grant. The majority of these awards are to be used in U of M core laboratories. And we have the link here if that's something you might be interested in. MDD also has a partnership program that offers funding opportunities. And then FFMI has the Therapeutic Innovation Fund, which again is a sort of earlier stage, really medchem specific type fund for therapeutic technologies. There are a few other resources of funding that are more specialized. These, again, are all offered to U of M specific technologies. We have the Frankel Innovation Initiative, which is operated out of FFMI, and this really targets high-risk, high-reward technologies with life-saving potential. There's the Massey TBI Grand Challenge. This is funded by a private foundation, and it's to advance technologies that will address traumatic brain injury care. There's also the Coulter Translational Research Partnership, and this is specifically for medical devices or diagnostics. It's operated through the engineering school. And then there is the Aikens Innovation Academy, which has educational content as well as project development activities, specifically for cardiovascular innovators, so those working in the CDC. So now to discuss specifically what one might do when looking for funding at the therapeutics state for therapeutics. If you were on our, I believe it was our second webinar, you learned a little bit about this timeline for bringing technologies to market. So here you can see that the technology or the funding programs that I mentioned earlier sort of span across a good chunk of this timeline. Basically, you'll probably certainly have identified a target and potentially working through the target validation when you might plug into some of the earlier funding programs, including the MDD, MCTI, and Advance. In vitro data is generally about where Kickstart will pick up. We're looking for some level of in vitro data, and we can fund some further lead optimization and expanding out on those in vitro studies, as well as trying to move forward to hopefully some in vivo efficacy data is what you try to get through with Kickstart. And then M-Track would pick up where they could expand out on that in vivo efficacy and then address some additional in vivo testing that would lead to the clinical trials and IND. So an example of a funding path within therapeutics, one might apply for the Michigan Drug Discovery Pilot Grant. They might do this to do some medicinal chemistry to improve efficacy and toxicity, so maybe medchem to improve binding to the target. At that stage, they might come to Kickstart, where they could potentially do additional medchem, maybe to look for new IP that would be held by the university. Also building out to do some synthesis, as well as, like I said earlier, ending with in vivo efficacy. In MTRAC, they might expand out to do further efficacy, maybe in another model, as well as working on the preclinical package that would be needed to move this forward to an IND. So PK, PD, safety, tox, things like that. And here we have our device timeline that Michelle presented in, I believe it was our 4th webinar. And so in this section, what we're looking at really is from that early ideas stage. This is where the BME student design might plug in. Again, once you have an idea that you need to develop and validate and design, you can plug into potentially the advanced program. If it's a little bit further along, you can plug into the Kickstart program, and then our larger programs would be the MTRAC and Coulter for more developed technologies. So it is an example of what a med device or diagnostic funding path might look like. A clinician might partner with the BME students to design and to ideate and design the initial prototype, as well as potentially do some benchtop testing. They may then come to Kickstart for further prototype design. This could be internal or external, and as well as some testing in an ex vivo model or potentially in a simulated environment. They could then move on to MTRAC or Coulter to further refine their prototype and potentially test it in a in vivo model or a clinical model. And here we have the digital health sort of pathway that I believe was discussed in the 3rd webinar from our series. Again, you'll probably want to start with a good plan. So participating in the digital discovery program prior to moving forward and seeking funding might be the best use of your time. Kickstart is going to pick up once you have an idea of what this will look like and how it'll function, and then MTRAC will expand on that. And so here we have an example. And so here we have an example, which is someone might do digital discovery to look into what would lead to a formal wireframe design. They could then apply it for Kickstart to design and develop their MVP and then test it locally. And then potentially moving on to MTRAC to refine and test their, I guess, beta at multiple institutions, therefore de-risking it a bit further to attract some partners externally. Oh, and my froze a little bit. Okay. So in summary of what Michelle and I have said here, really what you're going to want to do internally is going to be defined by your exit strategy. So you're going to think about how your technology fits into the competitive space. Is it disruptive or complementary? What are the market dynamics, and who are the potential customers or acquirers? You're also going to think about what your IP status is, as well as your goals as an inventor. Based on all of this, you'll need some amount of data to support an exit, and there are lots of available resources here at U of M, some of those including resources available to our external partners. So really, if you're interested in a conversation with either Michelle or myself about what your specific idea needs to move forward, I highly recommend that you participate in one of our idea consultations, where we can work with you to identify the resources that are best for your technology at this stage. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I'll also just add on quickly to Sarah's offer of idea consultations, just to remind you back at the beginning of this presentation about FFMI's Innovation Studio, which could also provide you a pretty holistic look at your technology. and bring a lot of the right stakeholders to the table to help you evaluate it from a funding as well as other technology development perspectives.
Question?
Yeah.
With the funding mentor, the ideal consultation, how do you go about making an appointment, and how long is those usually for? Is it one appointment or several, or how does that proceed forward?
So I believe that these slides are going to be shared with you after this talk. And so you can click this link here, provide us with a little bit more information on yourself as well as your technology, and then we'll connect you with the right person to meet with for a one-on-one conversation, usually about a half hour to an hour, and then we'll point you in the right directions and work with you from there. Lots of ongoing conversations, depending what stage you're at.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions for Michelle or Sarah? Okay. Well, please do take advantage of the idea consultation or the innovation studio that was mentioned, and look into all of the resources that were shared today. I want to thank you, Sarah and Michelle, both for providing your expertise this afternoon, and then thank everybody again for joining us on the call. We hope to see you at our next extramural funding webinar, so please log in and have your questions answered at that time. With that, I think we are done. Feel free to reach out if anything comes up, but if not, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.